There is a growing food and nutrition crisis across Adamawa, Borno and Yobe states. As at December 2016, the food assistance grew to 2.1 million people. The Humanitarian Response Plan for 2017 for Nigeria seeks more than $1 billion to meet the needs of 6.9 million people. My guest this week looks at the humanitarian situation in the Northeast. Hello there. Thank you for joining me on the program this week. I'm Gloria Umezuke. 8.5 million people require more form of assistance in Adamawa, Borno and Yobe states. Now, some of them require food assistance, some education and some health. The challenges in the region are enormous. On this week's edition of the program, we will be looking at efforts to resolve the humanitarian situation in the region. We're coming up next. Some of Nigeria's future leaders resident in the Northeast do not have access to food, water and healthcare. Well, according to the United Nations, 450,000 children will suffer from severe malnutrition in Borno State alone over the next 12 months. 8 agencies have just 18 months to deal with the fallout from the Boko Haram conflict, or Nigeria could face the consequences for years to come. Well, take a listen to this. The humanitarian situation in the Northeast is the 4th largest in the world. According to the United Nations, there are still about 8.5 million people in need of assistance in Adamawa, Borno and Yobe. 50% of them are children. As at December 2016, 2.1 million people are in need of food in the region. These tents spread across the various camps in the region have absorbed approximately 2.2 million internally displaced persons in Nigeria so far. In spite of these safety zones, the surge in suicide bombings have also resulted to a surge in the number of displaced persons. The resultant pressure calls for reinforcement to avoid a crisis situation.
The process for the adoption of the national policy began in 2012. Here we are 5 years later, still without a national policy. We have called this meeting so that we may together rub minds and explore all possible ways to get the national IDP policy adopted and passed into law.
Governor Kashim Shettima of Borno State says at least 100,000 persons have been killed in the 7 years of Boko Haram insurgency.
Climate change, endemic poverty, pervasive illiteracy. They provide the perfect mix to produce the perfect storm that will consume all of us. While it took South Africa's apartheid 42 years to take 21,000 lives, it took Boko Haram only 7 years to cause the murders of 100,000 lives of innocent people, largely women, children, and old people in Nigeria.
The United Nations is hoping to raise $1 billion to address the needs of 6.5 million people, a situation that needs to be addressed over the next 18 months.
We have to put out the fire in 18 months in Northeast Nigeria. If we don't succeed in putting up the fire in 18 months, the situation will become protracted and chronic. The root causes of this crisis is prolonged long-term development deficit, which has over the years been compounded by economic, political and religious factors.
Already, the United Nations is working with the National Assembly on a bill for a national commission to cater for peace, reconciliation, dialogue and mediation in the Northeast. In our interview this week, the resident coordinator of the United Nations, Mr. Edward Kalon, speaks to us about the efforts to address the Northeast situation. Mr. Edward Kalong, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me here today.
Yes, let's begin now with the major issue at hand. The country is still battling with the issue of insurgency, really. So what are the key issues from your perspective affecting the Northeast?
The Northeast has been virtually brought to its heels by the Boko Haram crisis. But there is hope at the end of the tunnel. The effort by the military is paying off. But I still strongly believe that that needs to be done in parallel with a political process that we try to address some of the root causes of the crisis.
Political process?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Exactly what I mean is that an engagement with some elements of Boko Haram that could lead to durable solution.
You're advocating for an engagement with the insurgents?
I am advocating for an engagement with elements that were coerced into that movement that could be an opportunity to find a lasting solution.
You know, we've heard a lot of, criticisms, suggestions, and the likes of it. Some people would align with your suggestions. Some people would say, no, don't give them that opportunity to, talk with the government. Just put them in their place, and so on and so forth. Why do you say we should talk with them?
There are so many people that are part of that movement, drawing from other experiences in other parts of the world that were coerced to the movement, that does not really believe in the ideologies they are trying to promote. These are the people that we bring the balance in trying to reach durable solutions.
So what are the issues?
The issues of the Boko Haram crisis has a long structural history, which I'm sure you are all familiar with. It has to do with long development deficits that are structural indeed, and that development deficit has over the years been compounded by economic, political, and religious factors. The youths have been at the center of this crisis, and the influence of radicalization has been a key element moving ahead. So what I am proposing is that a durable solution to this crisis must address these root causes. One, the long-term development deficit, the need to bring back hope to society, especially youths, the need to promote education for especially girls, and also the need to empower women that have been affected by the crisis.
The suggestions you give really are not new. We've had several instances where the government have been trying to upscale education, upscale food security, upscale even security in itself, and so many other things. But in spite of that, we still see insurgency coming on unabated. Is this enough?
What I have witnessed, I've been to this affected area, and I've traveled to the hinterland recently. And I saw some hope returning to nearly areas that have been liberated by the army. But you have to put this crisis in perspective. It's a crisis that is affecting youths that are mostly coming from this area, who have been radicalized over time. What we are calling for is a consolidated effort to try to create an alternative livelihood that we inspire these people to abandon radicalization and be back productive part of society. The current situation I see, youth sitting under the trees with nothing to do, is just a fertile ground for radicalization. So our call is that we need to look at the root causes of this crisis, which has a lot to do with the long development deficit in this part of the country, and to ensure that we bring in alternative hopes for people. Alternative hopes I'm talking about here, hopes that will give them livelihoods, hopes that will engage society more productively, and hopes that will inform society that radicalization is not an option.
What is the UN really? How is the UN intending to respond to all of this?
The UN is trying to see how we can support the government of Nigeria to bridge humanitarian and development nexus, and also try to see how we can work together with the government